Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for being here in Spirit Matters. We love you. We know you're out there. And we're so glad that you're listening. Whether you are, we got about a dozen people here in our live Zoom studio audience. We do this live every morning. And then we know that you're out there, wherever you are, putting your kids to bed, making breakfast, cooking dinner, going to sleep, falling asleep, playing hooky at work, like whatever you're doing right now. We're so glad that you are here. This is your daily spiritual check-in from the Bhakti Center. My name is Dal Grunga, and I'm here with my wonderful friend Rukmini Podar, who is our guest for this week. We have a new format of the show where we got guests every week, where you get to meet our community. The running tagline that I'm going with this show is conversations with our community. My wife wants to call it Dayal and Friends, but I'm leaning towards conversations with our community. And so Rukmini is such an integral part of our community. And if you don't know Rukmini, go back and listen to yesterday. We introduced her very well. How are you, Ruks? How are you doing this morning?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Daya. I'm happy to be here with you. And we had a great conversation yesterday, so I'm eager to pick up where we left off.
Good. She's doing great. Any weird dreams you want to tell us about? Any interesting happenings in the last
Oh, that's
24 hours?
No, sorry.
No.
I just forget my dreams the minute I wake up. I wish I remembered them. Did you have anything? Did you sleep well last night?
I did sleep well. I don't remember my dreams. When I look back on dreams, like I have very vivid, lucid, wild dreams that dissipate like in 30 minutes. And then I don't remember what was a dream or what was not.
Mm-hmm.
Or what was last night's dream or what was, last year's dream.
It's pretty wild, isn't it? Like we live this whole vivid, like lucid world, and then it's just gone. Like I
Gone.
literally sometimes when I wake up, I can like feel myself like holding on to like this invisible tether, like, wait, gotta remember it. And then if I don't hold on strong enough, it's just like gone. And that whole
Totally gone.
reality never existed. It's a
It's gone.
metaphor.
And then I try to fall back asleep. Let me get back in there. And you go
Yeah.
back to sleep and you're in a totally different place. Like, where am I? Where did that ice cream truck go?
Yeah, it's very interesting. This is a side like tangent, but it's apparently like a yogic practice to really enter and understand your dreams more.
100%.
I would love
Yogi
to learn that
Charu.
science. Yogi
Yogi Charu
Charu,
does
he does,
classes on it.
yeah, on
Yogi
dreaming.
Charu is coming to the Bhakti Center. When's Yogi Charu coming to the Bhakti Center? I'm going to look that up right now. He's going to do a master class, I think, in person this Saturday. If you're in person at the
Wow.
Bhakti
I
Center,
wish I was there. He's one of my favorite teachers. If he ever does an online class on dreaming, I would take it. I've had friends who've taken it, and literally he teaches you like the yoga of remembering your dreams, entering your dreams, your subtle body, how that works in dreams, eventually even
astral
like all this stuff.
projections,
What was that?
astral
The
projections,
astral projection. It's pretty
lucid
wild stuff,
dreaming.
guys. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
About
Yeah.
half our audience is like tuning in real hard. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. And half our audience is like, I'm out of here. This is not what I signed up for.
Yeah. Just putting
But
it out there.
he does a lot of like person, like he doesn't, like, it's not like promoted, like take my dream course, but he just works with a lot of people, like kind of like on Zoom or WhatsApp. I'll reach out to him. I'm going to try to, I'll reach out to him and maybe
Maybe
I'll
he
try to
can
see him
be
on
a guest.
Saturday. What's that?
I mean, maybe he can be a guest on this podcast.
Oh my
Talk
God, that'd
about
be
dreaming.
great.
He's
Yeah.
awesome. I would tune
Astral
into that.
projections with Yogi
Yeah,
Charu.
seriously.
He's got
Getting into your
wild
subtle body.
stories. He
Yeah,
spent
it's
he
insane.
spent time living up deep in the Himalayas, studying, meditating, doing yoga nidra, and he was a guest on Wisdom of the Sages here and there, and he's got wild stories,
Yeah.
beautiful stories, amazing stories, the kind
And
of
he's like
things
a
just like
legit yogi. He's not just like,
legit
I did my
yogi.
teacher training, I'm yogi something, which no offense to anyone who's done that, but he's like a real
No offense to
yogi.
anybody. I did my 200-hour yoga teacher training in Bali. Like, no,
That's all
he
great.
did it
I'm
in the
just saying that
Himalayas.
he lived with the sadhus in the mountains for who knows how
Yeah.
long.
Speaking of yoga teacher training, please sign up for the Bhakti Center's 200-hour yoga teacher training in Bali.
I was just trying to put that plug in.
We don't have one in Bali, but we got some in person. Anyways, yesterday, I loved our conversation yesterday. If you're just tuning in this week and you haven't tuned before, go back and listen to yesterday. Because Rukmini, you were sharing so much about your creative journey, and you're an entrepreneur, you're a creative. And there were two things that you were raising. Who was the author that you were referencing?
Yeah, first I referenced Stephen Pressfield, who's
Stephen
amazing. If you're
Pressfield.
hearing, look him up. He wrote the Legend of Bagger Vance was his first book that you might be familiar with, but since then, The War of Art might be his most popular. Amazing
Mm,
book. It will like kick you in the butt because it's just so strong, but it's all about like getting you out of your funk, out of your fear, out of your resistance, out of your procrastination,
yeah.
facing that thing that we're avoiding in order to create. So we talked about that book, and then we quoted like that beautiful quote by Marianne Williamson, which I almost
Yeah.
want to hear again because
You
it's
want me to
just
read it
so
again? I got it
profound.
right here.
Let's do it. Let's do it. It's such
All
a
right.
good.
There's this quote from Marianne Williamson. Whatever you think of Marianne Williamson,
Yeah.
set it
This is
aside.
a
I
this
like
is
her
a
early writings a lot.
yeah.
I think she's just now announced her 2024 presidential bid. So whatever you think of Marianne Williamson, set it aside and
Let's set it aside.
just appreciate this quote. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And it was reminding me when I read Glennon Doyle's first book,
Love
Courage, Courage to, I forget what her first book is called. What's her first book called? No, it's not her first book, Return to Love. It was something,
was it Love
Courage,
Warrior?
Love. No, we're going on tangent. It was her first book, Carry On Warrior. Carry On Warrior, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, Carry On Warrior. That's her first book, and it's a memoir. It's like just like the power of embracing your messy. What's the tagline? Your messy, beautiful life. It's a really good book. But at one point, she mentions in there the idea of confidence and humility. That confidence is knowing that you are a beautiful spark of God's splendor, and humility is knowing that everyone else is too.
Oh,
So humility doesn't mean that you have to think small of yourself. It just means that you don't have to necessarily think that you're greater than anyone else, but you
mhm.
still have tremendous potential to shine and to grow. And I think that if I can just set up in the context of the Gita, I think that's a huge message, a huge thread of Arjuna's confusion in the Bhagavad Gita, where there's this feeling that life is too big for me and I need to run away from it, or I need to abnegate my responsibilities, or I need to like hide certain parts of myself, or I'm not meant to because it's about humility and not having ego and arrogance. Like there's a difference between arrogance and confidence.
Yeah.
And you're allowed to have confidence in
Mhm.
spiritual life. And I love what you said yesterday, Rukmini, about the idea of the ego, and that it's our ego that actually keeps us small, because
Yeah.
the ego has a certain identity that this is all that I am. And to
Yeah.
believe that I'm more than that is actually an affront on the ego.
Yeah, exactly. It confronts it, and it's like holding you back from really shining and growing. And so that's the where like the self-sabotage comes in, or why we don't really get to that level. So yeah.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about like resistance yesterday. And
Mhm.
we had this quote from Stephanie: stop playing it small and presenting your authentic self. Would you like to, and I'm just rolling with questions here, would you like to share more about your journey and the resistance that you feel? I mean, you talk about internal resistance. I'm sure there's also external resistance, and just a little bit more of that journey for you to not play it small and present your authentic self, because you're writing a book, you've had an Instagram journey of growing a following and
Mm.
being done and over Instagram, and then getting back in the game and back and forth, and just like the sense of like show, and you do your 100-day project. So there is this sense of like, I think you are a a star of showing up, regardless of external approval, validation, even though there is a lot of that. And I
Mm.
think that there's a lot of people out there that would love to hear from somebody who shares a little bit about their experience of working through the challenge and resistance, especially someone who grew up in a spiritual movement, to like, I'm not going to fit in a mold. I'm going to explore my authentic self and present that in a world, but not like, look at me, I'm so great. But the humility isn't so much of like, I did it, but like, I'm simply aligning myself with God's will for my life.
Mm. Yeah, it's so great to get to that consciousness of that real humility. I think I can just start by saying I think that's something like a theme that I've always grappled with, like what is real humility? And intellectually,
Mm.
it's like, yeah, humility is not thinking less of oneself, it's thinking of oneself less, Humility is being able to, it's not low self-esteem. And yet, practically, I feel like those two things get mixed up all the time. So I guess saying from my own story, like yesterday you asked about my own background of being like a woman of color, being Indian, being, growing up in a certain culture. I think externally, all those things make it so that we, it's easier to play it small. It's easier to doubt oneself, I think, just culturally being in that container. And I lost my thread. I lost my thread. But yeah.
No, you were talking about like it's easy to think small of yourself, especially with so many
Yeah, it's easy. And
marginalized identities in society that tell you you're supposed to be
yeah,
small, and that this is what it means for you in this body, in this shape of material identity. And it's easy to just accept that and go along with that, and it takes a tremendous amount of courage to be able to decide against that and carve a path that may be different.
yeah, exactly. And I think also bringing that spiritual aspect of what is humility, it's really easy to confuse humility with that sort of like playing it small. And I think that's
Mm.
why I love that quote by Marianne Williamson. I love what you said about like true confidence and how these are all spiritual qualities. Because,
Mm.
and then also what you brought in about the Gita, like I would love to bring that in, that it's all about showing up, and you talked about my journey with the 100-day project. So for those who don't know, I have my brothers make fun of me. They're like, you follow this religiously, almost like it's Ramadan or something. Every year I'm like, the 100-day project is coming up, guys. But yeah, it's all about showing up for that process, showing up for our work. And in the Gita, it's similarly, when I realized that the Gita is about Arjuna showing up for his duty and responsibility and not running away,
Mm.
it sort of shifted what I thought of the Gita, that, wow, this is so insanely relevant and so applicable. And it's all about showing up to life and taking responsibility. Coming back to my own journey, it's funny until someone tells me like, wow, you're such a star for showing up. I'm like, really? Because for me, it's really hard and I feel so
You-
inconsistent. And
You're a star for showing up. I told you.
I know I heard it. Thank you. I'm accepting
You're
that.
showing up today, right now. This is you showing up.
Thank you. It's you showing up too, and everyone here. But for me, showing up has been, I think it's been more and more of a journey of how I show up. So you can show up, but are you showing up with a full heart? Are you showing up with vulnerability? Are you showing up knowing that you don't have all the answers and still you're here? And I think that's what vulnerability is. It's like leaning into that uncertainty. It's also what faith is. Faith is not certainty, actually. Faith is embracing that uncertainty, which is a really beautiful concept. But anyway, to share that, for me, my journey of showing up as an artist is saying, and really you have to lean into like, okay, this is like my duty in one sense. It's what I love to do, but it's also what I'm really committing myself to because it lights me up. I feel like it comes naturally for me. And I feel like this is like my offering I can make to the world is, and that's what I started realizing when I started doing my 100-day projects and sharing it online. I started to draw emotions. I had this whole series called Obscure Emotions. And it always started from a place of like me just wanting to tap into my own emotions and what I was feeling, which I think any good artwork is, any body of art, any creative act always is coming from a place of like necessity. Like, I need this for myself. And so in 2016, I was in a phase of life in between things, figuring out what I wanted to do. And I kind of coined this phrase, obscure emotions. And so I realized that I wanted to draw these emotions that I was feeling and yet didn't really have names for. What I didn't realize is that so many other people feel these emotions too. And so this is back in the day when I had like a couple hundred followers. I was not an Insta artist by any means. I just graduated college. I was traveling, and I started drawing these little pink figures and posting them online with my captions. And some of them
They're
on
not pink, by the way. They're strawberry red.
Thank you. If you go on my website, it says, why I have a FAQ, and it's like, why are all your figures pink? I'm like, it's not pink, strawberry red. So I appreciate you remember that detail. But to say that, yes, for example, some of the obscure emotions is like when you have inner confidence, when you have outer confidence but inner doubt, or when you want to adventure into the forest but you're afraid of getting lost, something like that. It's been a long time. I have to remember some. But to say that I started building this whole arc of creating every day, and what I'm trying to get at is that I realize other people feel this the same way too. And I think I'm going on a tangent, but this is like an example of showing up for me, and showing up with vulnerability was really important. And from there, I just kept building this tradition of doing these 100-day projects. And I guess that was my way of showing up. And I found it to be really meaningful. So I try to do it every year. Some years I don't complete it, and that's okay. And some years I do. But that is my
What
law.
motivates you? What motivates you to show up?
Yeah, good question. The Instagram likes, just joking.
By the way, everybody, please go over and follow Rocky.
Yeah, it's a part of it for sure. But it can't be all of it, like you just can't do something all the time for external validation. You might think you can, but at some point it feels really empty. So what motivates me is that if I don't do it, I feel totally out of whack. I realize that when I'm not creating, when I'm not doing this thing that makes me feel really alive, I feel easily aggravated, annoyed, easily envious of other people doing stuff. Like I just don't feel like myself. So I realize more and more, it's almost like a necessity. Like I need to do this thing every year because literally I'm just designed to do this. Like other people have their roles, their duties, their dharmas, like we talk in the Gita, and I'm getting more and more clear that this is something that is naturally, I feel like, propelled towards. And when I do it, I feel so connected. And when I don't do it, I feel so frustrated. That's the simple answer.
That's beautiful. There's a couple of things in there. One is the real importance of being in touch with your own experience of life. And a lot, like you said, that, we can't do something for external validation forever. Like that fuel runs out. Like we can do it for some time, but at a certain point that fuel runs out, and then we end up needing, like, I got to do something else or a different type of external validation, or we just get tired and exhausted. And I think that, one of the questions we also ended with yesterday was this idea of like, what I asked you the question, what motivates you? And the flip side of the question is, what am I afraid of? Wow. And I think both of them are really, really rooted in the idea of what's driving me, And I think that so much of the message of the Gita isn't so much, I was just reading yesterday, I have a community group here at the Bhakti Center, and we're reading through the Gita, and we were reading in the 3rd chapter, which is a lot of the verses we've been reading previously. And it's the idea of the 3rd chapter is titled Karma Yoga, the idea of the yoga of action, right? The yoga of action. Every chapter in the Gita is titled a type of yoga. The 1st chapter of the Gita is Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's despair, and how our despair can be a catalyst towards spiritual growth and action. How can I create my action, go about my life in such a way that it's connecting me more to higher truth rather than pulling me away from it? And so the idea of yoga of action isn't necessarily the idea of changing everything about your life, but changing the way you approach your life. And that involves being very much in touch of your motivation. Krishna doesn't say, stop doing everything, pull the plug, quit, resign, throw in the towel. He says, move forward with confidence, with vigor, with gusto. I don't know the Sanskrit word for gusto, but I'm sure it's there somewhere. But he says, don't do it from that place of ego, thinking that I make, or I'm the one, ahankar. but do it from a place of recognizing that like you are a big, beautiful, bright, shining light bulb that just needs to get connected to the light source.
That's a
A
good
light bulb in and of itself, you go to the store and buy a light bulb. If you're sitting in the middle of the forest, if you're sitting in the jungle, if you're on a deserted island and it's pitch black and you have a light bulb, that light bulb is of no value unless there's a place to plug it in. But let's say even if you had a massive generator, that generator needs a way of expressing itself through some external output. And so that conversation, that partnership, that dialogue really is the message of the Gita, that dance of the Gita between Krishna saying like, I'm the power source, I'm the generator. I'm not here to dim your light. I'm not telling you to like hide under a blanket. I'm telling you to take yourself out of the box, let yourself be the shape and the wattage and the voltage and whatever it is. We all have a different wattage and voltage and a shape of our light bulb, but just connect it to that power source. And if you connect to that power source, you can shine as bright and as beautiful as you want and need to and are supposed to. You're supposed to shine very, 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 very beautifully. And I think that is the death of the ego, because the ego wants to think I'm shining because I'm that.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. The word for ego, ahankar, literally means I maker. I'm the doer. I'm making it happen. It's all about me. I, me, mine. It's all resting on me. It's my accomplishment. And that is I think I was talking about this also maybe yesterday, but in a morning class. I don't know if I referenced in our podcast, but the idea of gratitude, that gratitude and ego are antithetical to each other, because ego naturally, false ego is the idea that I did it. Gratitude is the idea that something outside of me was given to me or assisted me, and I'm in that constant need. And that's the first moment of surrender in the Gita, where Arjuna is offering himself to Krishna. I can't figure this out on my own. Please guide me through it. And Krishna is saying, I'll guide you through. I'm not going to do it for you. I want you to shine, but just go forward in your life. And the yoga of action is be you, shine. There's that one verse that's repeated twice in the Gita, that it's better to do your own duty imperfectly than to try to follow another's path, quote unquote, perfectly.
I didn't know
and
that's
so I think,
twice.
What's that?
It's twice in the Gita, that verse.
It's true. Yeah, there are two verses in the Gita that are repeated twice. One is always think of me, absorb your mind in me, become my devotee. At the end of the 9th chapter and the 18th chapter. And also that verse is repeated twice. It's in the 3rd chapter. And then it also comes up again in the end. There's only 2 verses that are repeated twice. And one of them is literally be you.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing that was twice. What an important verse.
It's super important. It's super, 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 super important. And so that was one of the things we have is I have a rant, and then at a certain point I just ran out of gas.
That
I
was
ran out of
perfect,
gas.
though, Dora. That was I ran out of gas. It's, bringing it back to the Gita and to especially what Krishna says of, your analogy, he's the generator and we're the light bulb, is a perfect way to think about this, especially that fear of shining, that, I want to play it small. That's all the ego in the guise of humility. I mean, this idea of false humility is such a big one, because it keeps us from not really shining the way Krishna wants us to.
I have a question. We're at time here today. So if any of our live Zoomers have some takeaways, please write them in the chat. We'd love to know your takeaways, and we'll read out some takeaways, some things to put in your pocket. Then we'll each have a closing word from Rukmini. But for me, I think tomorrow, the questions that are on my mind are the idea of, I would love to hear more from you about this, the quote that we read at the beginning from Marianne Williamson, the idea that we're afraid of shining. We're afraid of being bright more than we are of like failure, being small. And that always intrigues me, because I think the natural thing is like, I'm not afraid of success. I'm not afraid of being, that's what I want. And I would love to hear more of your insights about that tomorrow, about what that really means and what that looks like, or how it's looked like for you. Because I think it's a very profound concept, but it's not always easily accessible or like apparent or obvious. It's almost kind of like this hidden concept. So that's where I'm thinking of for tomorrow. And if there's
Love that.
anything that
I don't
comes
know
up
if
on
I
your
know
mind.
the answer. I'm gonna think like why I'd say it's bewildering for me too. Why wouldn't we want to shine? And
Yeah.
what
Well, you
comes
better
up
know
for
the
me,
answer.
I mean, I'll just say
I'm
for
just
me
joking.
really quickly, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow. For me, I feel like it's coming from a place of like unworthiness, but from the ego. Not again, that's like it's such a
Mm,
fine thing because there's that spiritual unworthiness, which is so deep and so hard to understand. And then there's that like lack of worth that so many of us feel, that not enoughness. And so I think
yeah.
when she says, "Who am I to shine? Who am I?" Because we have this, at least I can carry that around. So, but that would be a good one to dive into tomorrow.
I love that. Yeah.
What keeps us
Pinpoint
from
that.
really stepping into who we are? I think a lot of ego stories for sure.
A lot of ego stories. Tomorrow we're going to get into self-deprecating, humiliating ego stories. So please join
My
us.
favorite topic.
My favorite topic. Some beautiful Stephanie shared with us. Plug into our light source and God will shine through us.
I love that.
The yoga of action, Leslie says, the yoga of action is to shine. Star emoji. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for those beautiful takeaways. Martha, let it shine. We are light.
This is
Beautiful.
great. This is so uplifting.
What's a takeaway for you? What are you walking away with today, Ruxi?
I'm walking away that yeah, Krishna is just right there telling us to, he's there fanning our flame, and he's telling
Mm,
us just be you. I mean, that really blew my mind that twice in the Gita, Krishna is saying, don't do someone else's duty, just do yours.
yeah, it's twice.
Beautiful.
Twice. Beautiful. Yeah. Hmm. I am taking away really, I really loved what you said about we can't do something for external validation forever. That
Mm,
it's a false fuel.
yeah, it
It's
is.
like a sugar high.
It's like a
You know?
caffeinated kind of,
It's like
like
a
you'll
caffeine, it's like a
run,
Red Bull. It's a
yeah,
Red
you'll
Bull.
run really fast in the beginning, you get all those
External
lights.
validation is like a Red Bull. Yeah, it'll give you a jolt, but it's not like sustainable for the system. It's like eating a donut for breakfast.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like you'll get a sugar rush for sure, and you'll feel like you ate something that gave you fuel. But like, come 11 o'clock, you're like, I,
I wrote that in my before.
something's not sitting right. And the solution isn't more donuts.
I thought
External
of
validation is like eating a donut for breakfast. Yeah, it
it.
is great, but it's not sustainable. Beautiful. Thank you so much for writing that down. Thank you all so much. We love you greatly, and I'm glad that you're here. Thank you to our live audience, all of you tuning in from all over the world. We appreciate you. Please join us again tomorrow. We'll be here, same time, same place. Thank you all so much. Bye bye.